I never imagined my brother's wedding day would become the moment every hidden fracture in our family split wide open. I was standing on the terrace overlooking the ceremony lawn, sunlight filtering through the pine trees, guests settling into their seats with cheerful chatter rising like a warm tide. I should have been beside my mother and brother smiling for photos, but instead I lingered alone near the railing, scrolling through images on the camera Mara had handed me earlier. I am not a professional photographer, but I help with lighting and equipment whenever Mara needs an extra set of hands. That was why I found the photos. Shots I did not take. Shots someone had tried to delete but failed. I felt the air shift before I heard him. My stepfather, Carl Brewer, appeared at my side, tall and stiff, wearing the same expression he always reserved for me, a mix of irritation and suspicion. His voice was quiet, almost calm, but the undertone was sharp. "What are you looking at, Emma?" I should have closed the camera. Should have lied. Instead, I hesitated for half a second. And that was all he needed. His hand shot out and clamped around my wrist so tightly my breath caught in my chest. "Come with me. Now." Before I could protest, he dragged me through a side walkway and into the bridal preparation room. The door slammed shut behind us. He locked it. The scent of hairspray and roses still hung in the air, the aftermath of bridesmaids rushing out minutes earlier. The room was empty except for scattered brushes and a forgotten speaker playing faint music. Carl stepped closer, his eyes drilling into mine. "Give it to me. What did you see?" My heart pounded against my ribs. I gripped the camera harder, feeling the strap digging into my palm. I tried to stay calm, but the truth pressed against my throat, like it had been waiting years to be spoken. I saw the hotel photos, Carl. You and the woman in the red dress, and the little girl calling you daddy. His face drained of color, not with guilt, but with raw fear. The kind that belongs to a man who has built his life on lies and is terrified they are finally slipping through his fingers. "You do not know what you think you saw." His voice trembled despite his attempt to keep control. But I did know, and something inside me snapped, all the years of being dismissed and pushed aside boiling over. I lifted my chin. "I know enough, and I know about the charity money too. You used Mom's foundation to pay for them." The moment the words left my mouth, his expression twisted into a rage I had never seen before. He stepped forward and before I could move his hand, swung outward in a brutal, open-handed strike. It connected with my face so hard my ears rang. I stumbled backward into the makeup table. Glass bottles toppled to the ground. Brushes clattered across the tile floor. For a moment, everything blurred. My cheek pulsed with heat. My eyes watered from the shock. And from somewhere outside the door, someone shouted, "Is everything okay in there?" Footsteps pounded toward the room. Carl grabbed my shoulder, his voice dropping into a frantic whisper as he prepared the lie he would tell. "Say you slipped. Say you were upset. Say anything except the truth." I shoved his hand away, forcing myself to stand. My legs wobbled, but I stayed upright. The door burst open, and a catering staff member froze in the doorway. Behind her came bridesmaids' ushers, and then my mother, whose face crumpled when she saw me holding my cheek. Michael pushed through the crowd confusion and anger, fighting for control in his eyes. Carl pointed at me immediately. "She fell. She has been acting unstable. She is trying to ruin the wedding." His voice rose just enough for everyone to hear. The room filled with murmurs, suspicion, judgment. Humiliation burned through me. They did not know what I knew. They did not see what I saw on that camera card. They did not understand who Carl really was beneath the polished smiles and carefully rehearsed charm. I steadied my breath. My voice came out low but steady. "Carl, I know the truth, and I am not letting you bury it." The room went silent. My mother shook her head overwhelmed. Michael looked torn apart. Guests hovered in the hallway staring at the unfolding scene. My cheek throbbed with every heartbeat. My wrist ached from his grip. And somewhere in the hallway, the wedding music continued playing as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. In that moment, the celebration ended, and the real story began. Before everything unraveled at my brother's wedding, my life had finally settled into something calm and bearable, a rhythm I had spent years trying to build for myself after a long and messy divorce. My name is Emma Caldwell, and at 36, I was finally learning what it meant to breathe again without waiting for something to go wrong. I lived in a small but warm cabin on the outskirts of Flagstaff, surrounded by tall ponderosa pines and the quiet hum of mountain wind. Every morning, the sun filtered through my workshop windows, landing across the slabs of walnut and oak I used to make handcrafted furniture. The place smelled of sawdust, linseed oil, and peace. It was the first home I ever lived in where no one raised their voice at me. My business was steady. A few local restaurants commissioned custom tables. A retired couple hired me to restore an old heirloom trunk. And most weeks, I worked alone with music playing softly in the background. It was simple, predictable, and entirely mine. My connection with my family was more complicated. My mother, Linda, had married Carl Brewer when I was 17. Even back then, something about him felt wrong, like he carried a storm behind his eyes that everyone else pretended not to see. Carl was charming to the outside world, respected in town for his work with a local nonprofit, but at home he was cold and calculating. He favored Michael, his biological son, in every way possible. Michael was only 2 years younger than me, and I loved my brother, but it was impossible not to notice how different our lives became once Carl joined the family. Michael got the newer car, the larger bedroom, the praise, the support, the unconditional belief that he could do no wrong. I got strict rules, dismissive comments, and a constant sense that whatever I did would never be enough. My mother tried to keep the peace, but she always ended up bending toward Carl, protecting harmony instead of truth. I moved out as soon as I turned 18 and returned only for holidays and major life events because Michael deserved at least that much. When my marriage ended 3 years ago, my mother invited me to stay with them for a while. Carl did not hide his displeasure. He never said the words, but his expression said everything. He did not want me back under their roof, and I knew better than to force myself into a home where I was barely tolerated. That was when I packed my things and relocated to Flagstaff, putting 100 miles of desert highway between me and the man who had spent years making me feel small. Still, family ties are stubborn. Michael and I remained close. He always checked in, always visited my workshop whenever he was in town, and when he met Claire, the woman who would later become his fiancée, I could see he had found something real. They were good together. Claire softened his edges and brought out a confidence that had been hiding beneath years of seeking our stepfather's approval. When Michael asked me to be part of the wedding preparations, I agreed without hesitation. I wanted his day to be perfect. I wanted to show up for him the way no one ever really showed up for me. So I cleared my schedule, took on fewer commissions, and spent months helping Claire choose flower arrangements, table settings, and layouts for the reception. It felt good to be included. It felt even better to see Michael so genuinely happy. What I did not realize was how much Carl hated seeing me back in the picture. At first, he played polite. He shook my hand, asked about my workshop, gave the illusion of civility. But he watched me. I felt it every time I turned around. His eyes lingered too long, calculating, suspicious. My mother tried to reassure me that he was just stressed about the nonprofit he helped manage. She said donations were down, the accountant had warned them about irregular spending, and the board was asking questions. But she said these things in a quiet voice, with shoulders pulled inward and hands fidgeting in the way she only did when she was truly afraid of something. I wanted to ask more, but she brushed the topic away. I could tell she did not want to worry me. Or maybe she did not want to say anything that might expose Carl in the wrong light. And then there were the subtle things that began happening in the weeks leading up to the wedding. I noticed my mother looking exhausted, as if she had cried recently. I noticed that Carl made decisions without consulting her. I noticed that he became irritated whenever I spent time with Michael, though he hid it behind a tight-lipped smile. I chose to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I should stay focused on celebrating my brother's new life, not questioning the shadows around the edges. After all, Michael deserved happiness, and I was determined not to let any old tension ruin that. The wedding venue was beautiful, a sprawling lodge tucked among tall evergreens with a terrace that overlooked a small lake. I arrived early to help Mara, the second photographer, set up lighting equipment. She was in her early 40s with sharp instincts and a quiet presence. We bonded quickly. I admired the way she observed everything without making people uncomfortable. That morning, while checking the spare memory cards, I noticed a set of thumbnails that did not look like wedding prep photos. They were darker, taken indoors, somewhere with patterned carpet and dim hotel lighting. At first, I dismissed them. Probably accidental shots from another event. But something in my gut insisted I look closer. And when I did, a cold wave ran through my body. The angle was slightly blurry, almost as if someone had taken the shot without aiming, but the figure in the frame was unmistakable. Carl, standing in a hotel hallway, with a woman much younger than him, and a little girl in his arms, a little girl who looked up at him with absolute trust. Before I could process it fully, Mara called me to help reposition a reflector, and I forced myself to act normal to swallow the shock. I did not know yet that what I found was only the beginning, the calm before the storm, the last quiet moment before my entire family's truth imploded. In the weeks leading up to Michael's wedding, there were signs everywhere subtle enough that I could have dismissed them, but persistent enough that they lingered like an itch beneath the surface of my thoughts. At first, I believed it was just ordinary wedding stress, the kind any family experiences when trying to coordinate vendors, guests, budgets, and expectations. But looking back, I can trace every moment where something inside me whispered that something was wrong. It began with my mother. She had always been a warm and gentle woman, the kind who remembered birthdays, who made homemade soup whenever someone was sick, who kept every handwritten card her children ever gave her. But in the final month before the wedding, I noticed her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She was thinner, distracted, constantly checking her phone as though waiting for something she feared. Whenever I asked if she was all right, she brushed me off with a quick nod and a forced grin. Wedding planning is overwhelming, Emma. You know how these things are. But she had planned events before, including my own wedding years ago, and she had never looked this unsettled. Then there was Carl. He had always been controlling, but something about his behavior felt sharper now, almost frantic beneath the surface. Whenever I came by the house to help with wedding logistics, he hovered around the edges of conversations, listening with too much interest, jumping in to redirect discussions, steering decisions away from me, as if afraid I might take over something. He became uncharacteristically territorial over tasks that were not even his to begin with. He demanded to approve the seating chart. He insisted he needed to handle the payment schedule for the vendors. He inserted himself into Claire's decisions with forced authority. Whenever I spoke, he cut me off. Whenever Michael asked for my opinion, Carl quickly changed the subject. It was subtle, but it was suffocating. Once, while we were arranging wedding favors on the dining table, my mother dropped a glass jar. It shattered, and she flinched so violently that all of us froze. Her hands shook as she tried to clean it up, mumbling apologies as though she had committed a terrible crime. I knelt beside her and touched her shoulder gently. "Mom, it is just glass," I said quietly. "It is not a big deal." She nodded, eyes wet, but said nothing more. Carl walked in halfway through the cleanup, and instead of checking if she was all right, he looked directly at me and said, "You should be more careful, Emma." The words made no sense. I was not even touching the jar, but he stared at me like he wanted to make sure I felt responsible. Michael seemed oblivious to all of it, his head buried in work wedding details and dreams of the future. He wanted the ceremony to be perfect, and because he idolized Carl, he trusted the man's decisions without hesitation. That trust had always been their bond, the thing I could never compete with. But this time, there was something else in the air, something I could not name. The first real warning came when Mara, the second photographer, pulled me aside one afternoon while we were testing lighting equipment at the venue. She was wiping down a lens when she looked at me and asked softly, "Emma, has your stepfather been acting odd recently?" The question stunned me. Most people never noticed anything unusual about Carl. He was careful with his mask. "Why do you ask?" I replied tentatively. She hesitated and said nothing more at first, only returning to her equipment with a troubled expression. I decided I was reading too much into it. But then came the rehearsal dinner. Families gathered at a beautiful lodge restaurant near the lake, decorated with candles, fresh flowers, and white tablecloths. Guests' mingled laughter filled the room, and everything looked perfect from the outside. Yet I could feel the tension crackling beneath the surface like electricity. My mother barely touched her food. She kept glancing toward Carl as if checking whether she was allowed to speak. Michael was glowing with excitement, but each time he approached Carl, the man stiffened before forcing a smile. Carl kept disappearing into secluded corners to answer whispered phone calls, his voice low and urgent. When I walked too close, he would turn away from me. At one point, I caught him slamming his phone onto the table with clenched teeth before quickly hiding it in his jacket. And then something strange happened. When I offered to help Mara organize her equipment near the end of the evening, she whispered to me almost reluctantly, "Emma, there is something I need to show you later. Something I found by accident." Her expression was serious, the kind of serious that makes your stomach tighten. I asked her what she meant, but she shook her head. "Not here, not tonight." The next morning, during setup, I went to retrieve a spare memory card from Mara's equipment bag. That was when I saw them again. The hotel photos, a dim hallway, a patterned carpet I recognized from a hotel in Prescott, a man whose profile looked disturbingly like Carl, a young woman with long hair, and a little girl with curly pigtails and a stuffed rabbit. They looked like a family Carl had never mentioned. I felt cold sweat creep down my neck, but the photos were blurry, unclear. They could have been anyone. I told myself that, tried to convince myself that my mind was filling in the gaps, but my stomach knew better. That was the moment I began truly watching Carl, and once I started watching, I could not stop. I noticed how he checked the pockets of my purse every time I entered the bridal lounge. I noticed how he tried to position himself between me and any bag drawer or item that could store electronics. I noticed how he grew tense whenever Mara approached me. And the strangest sign of all came 2 days before the wedding. My mother had invited me over to help finalize table assignments. When I arrived, Carl was standing in the living room holding a stack of mail. One envelope slipped from his hand as I walked in, and documents spilled across the floor. Receipts, bank statements, charitable donation reports from the nonprofit. One page caught my eye. A transfer of several $1,000s to a woman's account, a name I did not recognize. Carl scrambled to gather the papers, his movements oddly frantic. He snapped the folder shut and glared at me with a sharpness that felt like a warning. "Should not you be getting ready for the wedding, Emma?" His voice carried an unmistakable edge. I left quickly after that. Something inside me whispered louder, now urgent and insistent. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I told myself I would deal with it after the wedding. I told myself I needed to stay focused on Michael's big day. I convinced myself that whatever I had seen was not worth ruining the happiest moment of my brother's life. But the truth was already in motion, and the closer the wedding day came, the stronger my unease grew until it felt like the air around me was tightening. Looking back now, I realize I did not miss the signs. I simply did not want to believe them. I did not know that every strange detail, every uneasy moment, every flicker in my mother's eyes was the beginning of the storm that would break us all. The night before the wedding, when everything should have been calm and final details should have been tucked neatly into place, my phone rang at exactly 12:47 a.m. At first, I thought it was a wrong number. No one calls me that late unless something is terribly wrong. The screen glowed in the darkness of my bedroom, and when I saw the caller ID, my stomach tightened. It was Mara. She never called outside work hours and certainly never past midnight. I answered immediately, sitting up in bed with my heart thudding against my ribs. "Mara, are you all right?" Her voice came through barely above a whisper, trembling with urgency. "Emma, I need you to come to my studio right now. Come alone. Do not tell anyone you are coming." I swung my legs out of bed, already reaching for my jeans. "Mara, what is going on? Did something happen to the equipment?" She inhaled shakily. "This is not about the wedding equipment. It is about something I found tonight. Something I was not supposed to find. You need to see it with your own eyes. And Emma, do not tell your stepfather you are coming." Hearing Carl mentioned in that tone, that fearful hushed tone sent a cold wave through me. I grabbed my keys, slipped on a hoodie, and hurried out the door. The air outside was cold enough to sting my lungs. My truck's headlights cut through the dark road as I drove down the quiet streets toward Mara's small photography studio near the old art district. The whole time, my mind raced. What had she found? Did it have anything to do with those strange photos I saw earlier? Why would Carl's name come up? When I pulled into the studio parking lot, the lights inside were dim except for a single lamp glowing through the back window. Mara opened the door before I even knocked. She looked pale, shaken, and exhausted. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun like she had been working nonstop for hours. "Emma, thank you for coming," she said quietly. Her eyes darted to the street behind me as if checking to make sure I had come alone. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Mara led me to the editing room, a small space with 2 monitors, stacks of memory cards, and a bulletin board filled with sample prints. On the desk sat a laptop with several folders open. She gestured toward the screen. I found these files in the backup memory card. Someone tried to delete them permanently. Someone knew they should not exist, and I think they tried to cover their tracks. My heart started pounding again. Mara opened the first photo. At first, all I saw was a dimly lit hotel hallway. But then she zoomed in. The patterned carpet, the gold trim on the wallpaper, the timestamp in the bottom corner reading the night before the rehearsal dinner, and then the figures appeared, clearer, sharper, undeniable. Carl, dressed casually, holding hands with a woman at least 15 years younger. She was laughing, leaning into him like they were lovers. Then Mara opened the second photo. This time, Carl was crouching down beside a little girl about 6 years old with curly brown hair and a stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. The child's small hand rested on Carl's shoulder as she kissed his cheek, and the sound I made was a choked whisper. "Oh, my God." Mara swallowed hard. "There is more." She clicked through several photos. The woman, the child. Carl checking into a hotel room. Carl carrying a gift bag. Carl hugging the little girl goodnight. The images painted a picture clearer than words. This was not a secret fling. This was a double life, a family, a child, a relationship that had lasted years. I felt my knees weaken and Mara quickly pulled a chair toward me. I sat down staring at the screen in disbelief. My mother had no idea. Michael had no idea. This was not a simple affair. This was betrayal woven into the deepest parts of our home. I whispered the only question I could manage. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Mara clicked on the metadata details. Dates, locations, times, some going back 7 years. 7 years of secret hotel rooms. 7 years of lies. 7 years of money spent under the table. And then, Mara opened a final folder. This one was labeled financial documents. I stared at her. "Mara, how did you get these?" She rubbed her forehead. "I do not know who put them in the backup card. Someone must have been scared the files would disappear. They were hidden inside a mislabeled subfolder. And Emma, you need to look at this one. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer linked to my mother's nonprofit organization. Money redirected into an account under a different woman's name. The same surname that appeared on the little girl's hospital bracelet in one of the photos. The realization hit me so hard, I felt physically ill. Carl had been using my mother's charity funds to support his second family. Thousands of dollars, possibly more, all siphoned away without my mother's knowledge. I covered my mouth with my hand, trembling. Mara placed a USB drive in front of me. "I made a backup of everything. Take it. Do not lose it. And Emma, please be careful. If Carl realizes you know any of this, he will do whatever it takes to keep you quiet." I closed my fingers around the USB drive, the metal cold in my palm. For the first time that night, I felt fear crawl up my spine, not for myself, but for my mother, for Michael, for the family I thought I understood. The truth was sickening, and tomorrow was the wedding, the day that would bring every hidden lie crashing into the open, whether I was ready or not. The morning of Michael's wedding began with the kind of bright Arizona sunlight that makes even the coldest air feel golden. The lodge grounds were quiet when I arrived just after 7, dew still clinging to the grass and the lake covered in a thin mist that drifted like a veil over the water. Under any other circumstances, it would have been a perfect start to a perfect day, but I was carrying the USB Mara had given me the night before, tucked deep inside a hidden zipper compartment in my purse, and the weight of it felt heavier than iron. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the images replayed in my mind. Carl with the woman in the red dress. Carl hugging the little girl with the stuffed rabbit. The timestamp. The 7 years of evidence. The financial records pointing directly to my mother's nonprofit. And the most haunting part of all, the way my mother had looked lately exhausted, unsure, afraid, without understanding why. I parked behind the event barn and sat in my truck for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I needed to hold myself together for Michael. Whatever storm was coming would hit soon enough, but I refused to let it ruin the most important day of my brother's life. When I stepped out of the truck, Mara was already unloading lighting stands nearby. She gave me a quick glance, scanning the area first, then approached me with a whispered "Morning." "You all right?" I forced a small nod. "I will be." She placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Keep your guard up today. He knows something is wrong." I felt the unease settle deeper into my chest. As the staff began arriving, the wedding venue transformed from quiet twilight into a whirl of activity. Caterers rolled in carts of fresh pastries and fruit platters. Florists adjusted the arrangements under the wooden arch by the lake. Bridesmaids drifted toward the dressing suite in matching satin robes, laughing and sipping mimosas. From the outside, it was the image of pure joy, but beneath that celebration, tension rippled like a current only I seemed to feel. I spotted my mother near the terrace stairs, arranging silverware on the reception tables. She looked beautiful in a pale blue dress, but her shoulders were tense and she kept glancing at her phone. When she noticed me approaching, her smile flickered on, warm but tired. "Emma, sweetheart, can you help me with the place cards?" I hugged her gently. "Sure, Mom. How are you feeling?" She hesitated before answering, her voice too light to be honest. "Excited, nervous. You know weddings always get to me." I studied her face, the faint bruised shadows beneath her eyes, the forced smile. She was unraveling, and she did not even know why. I wanted to tell her everything right then, wanted to sit her down and show her the photos, the documents, the truth. But I also saw Michael across the lawn, speaking with the officiant, practically glowing with happiness. I could not take this day away from him. Not yet. Not like this. So I swallowed the truth and helped my mother arrange the cards, pretending nothing was wrong, even though my heart pounded every time Carl entered the vicinity. He spotted me within minutes. He was dressed in a dark suit with a crisp tie, looking every bit the devoted husband and proud father he wanted the world to believe he was. But the moment his eyes found mine, the mask slipped just a fraction. Enough for me to see the tension tightening his jaw. Enough for me to know he understood exactly what I had discovered. He approached slowly, pretending to examine the floral centerpieces. His voice was low but clipped. "You look tired, Emma." "Rough night." I kept my expression neutral. "Long night helping Mara set up. That is all." His eyes flicked to my purse, then to me. "You know this is a big day for your brother. Do not cause any unnecessary scenes." I forced myself not to react. As he turned away, Mara shot me a warning look from across the lawn. The morning drifted on with uneasy normalcy. Claire's mother arrived. The makeup artist set up her station. The hairstylist curled and pinned and sprayed until the bridesmaids looked flawless. I floated between rooms, helping wherever needed, trying not to let my fear show. Then came the moment that tightened the atmosphere even further. While helping Mara replace a battery pack near the dressing suite, I noticed Carl standing outside the bridal room door, speaking quietly to someone on the phone. His voice was too low to catch most of the words, but I heard fragments enough to piece together the intent. "Not today. She cannot know. I told you to stay quiet. I do not care what she wants. Do not come here." He ended the call abruptly, pocketed his phone, and scanned the hallway. When he noticed me watching, he offered a stiff smile that did not match his eyes. Something inside me curled with dread. If I had any doubt left before, it vanished now. Carl was not simply hiding an affair. He was afraid. Afraid of exposure. Afraid of someone else showing up. afraid of losing everything, which meant he was unpredictable and dangerous. The hours crept closer to the ceremony. Michael's laughter echoed through the groom's suite as his friends teased him. My mother flitted around, trying to hold everything together. Guests began arriving in elegant blues, grays, and summer florals. And through it all, Carl's eyes flicked toward me every few minutes, watching, assessing, calculating. I kept the USB drive secure, checking the hidden zipper more times than I should have. A part of me wondered if I should hand it to Mara for safekeeping, but I could not risk losing it. I was the only one who could protect the truth now. And then the tension reached its peak. Just before the ceremony, while helping adjust Claire's train in the bridal suite, I stepped into the hallway for some air. That was when Carl appeared, blocking the doorway with one hand braced against the frame. His voice was low and sharp as a blade. "We need to talk, Emma. Right now." I tightened my grip on my purse. "About what?" He leaned in too close, his breath smelling faintly of coffee and control. "Whatever you think you know, you need to forget it. Today is not the day for your nonsense." I met his gaze steadily. "I know exactly what you have been doing, and I am not afraid of you." His jaw clenched so hard a muscle twitched near his temple. For a moment, I thought he might strike me then and there, but a bridesmaid turned the corner laughing and he stepped back, smile returning instantly, mask snapping into place as if nothing had happened. "See you at the ceremony," he said calmly before walking away. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mara hurried toward me, eyes searching mine. "Emma, what did he say?" Before I could answer, the wedding coordinator called out, "It is time for pre-ceremony photos." Guests were already gathering. The music was ready to start. The day was officially beginning, and I knew with absolute certainty that before the sun set, the truth Carl had spent years hiding would erupt. The wedding had begun, and so had the unraveling. The ceremony was minutes away when everything collapsed. Guests were settling into their rows, the music team tuning soft chords on their violins, and sunlight flickered gently over the lake, making the whole scene feel deceptively serene. Claire was already in her gown, glowing with excitement, and Michael was pacing nervously with his hands trembling the way they always did when he cared too much. No one suspected the storm brewing behind one closed door. Least of all me. I had stepped away from the bustle to breathe for a moment, leaning against the terrace railing with my purse held protectively at my side. The hidden USB felt like a heartbeat against my hip. Mara had sent me a brief text warning, "Be alert, he is watching you." I had barely read it before the preparation room door clicked open behind me. Then came Carl's voice. "Emma, in here, now." I turned slowly. His expression was tight eyes, sharp with a calculation so intense, it felt like he had been waiting hours for this exact moment. I hesitated only a second, but he took that as defiance, and his face hardened even more. "Do not make a scene. The last thing your brother needs is you ruining his wedding." His voice was measured and polite enough that anyone passing by would think he was being helpful, but his eyes told the truth. I stepped into the room, and he closed the door behind us. The lock slid into place with a quiet click that echoed like a threat. The room was filled with makeup brushes, curling irons cooling on the counter, leftover mimosas on a tray, and Claire's bouquet resting carefully on a velvet chair. The cheerful atmosphere clashed violently with the storm inside Carl's expression. He didn't waste a second. "Give me the memory card, Emma. Now." There was no more pretending, no more polite hostility. His voice was raw, stripped of the mask he showed everyone else. I crossed my arms over my purse. "I do not know what you are talking about." His lip curled. "Do not insult my intelligence. You saw the photos. You know what is at stake." My heartbeat thudded against my ribs. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but fear clawed at my throat. I thought of Mara's warning. I thought of my mother's tired eyes. I thought of the little girl in the photos calling him Daddy. And I thought of the wedding guests sitting just outside these walls, unaware of how close this entire day was to unraveling. Carl stepped closer. His voice dropped to a low growl. "You want to protect your mother? Do you think she can handle losing everything? because one word from you and the foundation collapses. She will be charged. She will be humiliated. She will lose her home, her job, her reputation. All because you do not know when to keep your mouth shut. The words hit me like shards of glass. He was threatening my mother, using her as a shield to protect himself. He interpreted my silence as hesitation. "Good," he said softly. "You understand the consequences now. So hand it over." My hands shook, but I forced myself to hold my ground. "I know you have another family," I said quietly. "I know you have been stealing from Mom's nonprofit, and I know the child in those photos is yours." His eyes widened for a second before an animalistic anger took over. He lurched forward, grabbing my arm so hard I gasped. "You do not know anything." His voice thundered in the small room. "I know enough." I managed pulling my arm back. "And I am not letting you hurt her anymore." His breath grew ragged. He reached for my purse, yanking it from my shoulder. I tried to hold on, but he was stronger. Much stronger. He dumped everything onto the vanity table. Lipstick, wallet, keys, compact mirror. He searched through them with frantic, jerky movements. "Where is it?" His voice cracked with desperation. I backed away slowly, hoping to reach the door, but he noticed. "Stay where you are." He was panting now, sweating, losing control. "If anyone sees those files, my life is over. Do you understand me? I will not let you destroy everything I built." I swallowed hard. Everything you built it on lies. You built it on stolen money. You built it on betraying my mother. He slammed his fist against the table so hard the makeup bottles jumped. "Do you think anyone is going to believe you? Emma, you have always been the unstable one. You have always been dramatic. You will look jealous, bitter, desperate for attention." It was the same script he had used for years. Gaslighting, dismissing, dismantling. His voice dropped again, colder this time. "And if you think you can expose me without consequences, you are more naive than I thought." The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I took a deep breath. "The memory card is not here." It was the truth. The real evidence was the USB hidden inside the lining of my dress pocket, the one he had not found. He froze, his face twisted into something monstrous. "You did not!" His voice shook with rage. "You gave it to someone. Who has it? Is it the photographer? If you ruin this wedding, I swear to God I will make sure you regret it." Before I could answer, he grabbed me by the shoulders and shoved me backward. My spine collided with the vanity table. Sharp pain shot down my arm. He stepped forward, raising his hand. And then it happened again. The hit, harder than the one from earlier. His palm struck my cheek in a blistering shockwave that made my vision blur. I stumbled sideways into the makeup chair, knocking it over as glass bottles crashed onto the floor. My ears rang. My breath caught. My cheek burned. And just like before, someone outside heard the noise. A bridesmaid's voice rang out. "Did someone fall?" "Are you okay in there?" The doorknob rattled. Carl spun toward the noise, panicking. He reached for me, grabbing the front of my dress as if preparing to drag me out of sight. But I found my voice before he could. "Get your hands off me!" I shouted loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. The door burst open. Claire's cousin gasped. Behind her stood another bridesmaid and two of the catering staff. Their eyes widened as they took in the overturned chair, the scattered powders on the floor. My reddened cheek and Carl standing inches from me, with fury still carved into his face. The room fell silent. Then whispers erupted behind the doorway. Carl's expression snapped back into his mask of calm. "She fell," he said firmly. "She has been unstable all morning. She tried to start a fight." "That is not what happened," I said, voice trembling but strong. Carl turned to the crowd with his perfected look of concern. "I do not know what is wrong with her, but she needs to leave before she ruins Michael's day." My chest tightened with humiliation. The crowd stared at me, judgment heavy in their eyes. No one moved to help me. No one believed me. Not yet, and Carl knew it. But he did not know what I still had hidden. He did not know the truth was already beyond his control. He did not know this was the last day he would ever get to hurt anyone, because the wedding was only the beginning. The real reckoning was coming. The hallway outside the preparation room exploded into a blur of whispers, gasps, and confused faces. My cheek was throbbing, my vision still slightly unfocused from the blow, but I stood tall because I knew if I showed even one crack, Carl would use it to destroy me completely. Guests who had wandered upstairs to use the restrooms stopped mid-step when they saw the scene. Bridesmaids hovered near the door, clutching their bouquets, as if unsure whether to drop them or run. But the person whose reaction hit me hardest was my mother. She appeared at the end of the hallway, visibly flustered from rushing her pale blue dress, swaying as she hurried toward us. Her eyes landed on me first, then on Carl, then on the overturned chair and scattered makeup tools. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her chest. "Emma, what happened?" Carl immediately stepped forward, adopting that gentle, patronizing tone he used when manipulating her. "She fell, Linda. She has been acting off all morning. I tried to help her and she panicked." My mother's face crumpled with confusion. She turned to me quickly as if searching for the truth in my eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could form a full sentence, Michael came barreling toward us from the staircase below. He looked furious and worried at the same time. "What the hell is going on? People down there are saying you screamed. Emma, are you okay?" Relief washed over me for one brief second. My brother had always been my anchor. Surely he would look at my face, see the truth written there, and stand beside me. But Carl answered before I could. "She is trying to ruin your wedding, Michael." She barged into the room, screaming accusations and knocking things over. I sighed internally. The script. The same script he had been using for years. Paint me as unstable, emotional, dramatic. A problem. Michael frowned deeply. "Emma, why would you do something like that today of all days?" I felt my heart drop. Michael, it was Carl. He hit me. He dragged me into this room and tried to force my purse open. "There are things you do not understand. There are photos of him with another woman and a little girl. I have evidence." For a moment, the entire hallway froze. Every whisper stopped. Every gaze locked onto me. My mother covered her mouth. Michael stared at me as if I had slapped him. Claire's cousin exchanged a horrified glance with one of the bridesmaids, and Carl did not even blink. Instead, he released a breathy, almost pitying laugh. "She needs help," he said softly. "She has clearly let her bitterness get to her. You know how she gets when she feels left out." I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. Years of being dismissed, minimized, gaslit, all condensed into that one awful moment. I tried again. "Michael, please, listen to me. I am not making this up. He has been using Mom's charity money to support another family." My mother let out a sharp, weak sound, almost a plea. "Emma, stop. That is enough." She looked devastated, eyes swimming with fear and denial. She turned toward Carl, her voice trembling. "That is not true, right, Carl? Tell me that is not true." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, right on cue, performing exactly as he always did. "Of course it is not true, Linda. You know me better than that." She nodded too quickly, desperate to believe him. I watched the denial wash over her because accepting my words would mean accepting that her entire marriage was a lie. Michael looked around at the forming crowd, clearly embarrassed by the growing spectacle. He lowered his voice, but his disappointment was like a slap. "Emma, you need to leave." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Leave? Because Carl said so. Because I am telling you something you do not want to hear." He exhaled, sharply running a hand through his hair. "I do not have time for this. Claire is getting ready to walk down the aisle and people are staring. You are making a scene." My throat tightened painfully. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and beg him to see the truth, but all I could do was stare at the brother who once protected me from every bully now defending the man who hurt me. I tried one last time, voice-breaking Michael. "I am trying to protect you. Protect Mom. Please." Carl stepped between us smoothly. "Emma, you are ruining everything." His tone was calm but laced with venom. The bridesmaids gently guided me toward the staircase, their eyes avoiding mine. Not one of them intervened. Not one tried to understand. To them, I was the problem. The dramatic older sister. The unstable one. The one who could not keep quiet. My mother grabbed my arm softly, tears in her eyes. "Just go home, sweetheart. Please, not today." The words cut deeper than any hit Carl could give. She believed him. Again. And I realized in that moment that everyone was so wrapped up in the perfect image of the wedding that they would rather cling to a lie than face the truth I was offering. I stood frozen on the staircase, feeling the weight of every betrayal, every time I had been silenced, every moment Carl had made me the villain. The humiliation was suffocating. One final glance toward Michael showed him already turning away, adjusting his suit as if trying to erase the entire scene from his mind. I felt something inside me harden, not break harden, because they could ignore me today. They could doubt me, accuse me, dismiss me. But the truth was real. I had evidence stronger than any of Carl's manipulative words. And I still had that USB hidden safely away, the one thing Carl had not found. One day soon, everything he had built would collapse. One day soon, the truth would be undeniable. They could choose him today. But tomorrow, I would make sure they saw exactly who he really was. And when they did, the entire family would realize that the real scene was not mine. It was his. I drove away from the wedding venue in a haze of disbelief, anger, and humiliation so sharp it felt like my skin could barely contain it. The bright Arizona sun was blinding as I pulled onto the highway, but nothing outside the windshield compared to the storm raging inside me. My family had just chosen Carl over me. Again. My own mother. My own brother. They believed his lies without hesitation. They believed his performance, his calm voice, his fake concern, and they saw me as nothing but the unstable daughter, the dramatic sister, the one who had shown up only to cause trouble. I wiped my face roughly with the back of my sleeve and forced myself to breathe. I told myself over and over that anger would not help me, that humiliation was temporary, that the truth was still mine. Carl could manipulate them for a day, but he could not erase what I had seen, and he could not erase what I carried. The USB drive burned against my skin through the pocket of my dress like a pulsing heartbeat. The only thing more powerful than Carl's lies was evidence. Hard evidence. The kind that could not be gaslit. The kind that could not be talked around. The kind that could destroy him. I headed straight to the only place I knew I would be safe and taken seriously, the office of my friend and attorney, Sandra Blake. Sandra was in her mid-40s, sharp as a razor with a calm presence that could steady a tornado. She and I had met years earlier when she hired me to build a custom walnut desk for her home office. We had stayed close. She was the one person I trusted without question. Her office lights were off when I arrived, but her car was in the lot. I knocked on the glass door, and moments later she appeared looking puzzled until she saw the expression on my face. "Emma, what happened? You look like you have been through hell." I stepped inside, and the second the door closed behind us, the weight on my chest finally broke. "He hit me, Sandra. Carl hit me. Twice." Her eyes sharpened instantly. She guided me gently into her conference room and sat me down. "Start from the beginning. And do not leave anything out." I told her everything. The rehearsal dinner strangeness, the photos I found accidentally, the midnight call from Mara, the evidence of his second family, the stolen nonprofit funds, the confrontation in the preparation room, the hit, the lies, the humiliation, my mother's terrified eyes, Michael's disbelief. By the time I finished, Sandra's jaw was clenched, her entire posture tense with controlled anger. "Emma, show me the files." I pulled out the USB, my hands trembling slightly, still feeling the imprint of Carl's fingers on my arms. She plugged it in, opened the folders, and the screen filled with the images Mara had shown me. Carl in the hotel hallway, Carl with the younger woman, Carl hugging the little girl, the timestamp, the metadata. 7 years of secret life. 7 years of deceit. Then came the bank transfers, donation logs, unauthorized withdrawals, payments made to the woman under a disguised vendor name. Sandra zoomed in on the numbers, whispering to herself, "Oh my God." He used the nonprofit as his personal bank. She scrolled through the records, slowly, methodically analyzing patterns, dates, amounts. Finally, she leaned back and removed her glasses. "Emma, this is serious. This is felony level. Fraud, embezzlement, misuse of funds, and depending on how much your mother knew or didn't know, she could be liable if we do not act fast." My stomach twisted. I knew Mom had no idea. She always trusted Carl blindly. She believed him because he made her feel small and grateful and dependent the way abusers always do. Sandra continued, "Carl is in deep trouble. Very deep. We need to move strategically. If he realizes you have copies of these files, he will try to destroy them. He may even try to hurt you again. You cannot go home alone tonight." I swallowed hard. My chest tightened with both relief and fear. Relief because finally someone believed me. Fear because the truth was bigger than I realized. And then the thought hit me like cold water. Michael. My brother had no idea who he'd just defended. Sandra must have seen the panic in my eyes because she leaned in. "Emma, you did the right thing. Your family may not see it now, but they will. The truth always wins eventually." "Not on its own," I whispered. "Carl is manipulative. He knows how to twist reality. He could turn the whole town against me if he wanted." Sandra shook her head firmly. "Evidence beats manipulation every time, but we need more than photos and financial screenshots. We need corroboration, witnesses, verified documents, people who can place him with that woman, people who can confirm those transactions, paper trails he cannot erase." As if the universe was listening. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated. "Answer it," Sandra said quietly. I put the call on speaker. A shaky male voice whispered, "Emma Caldwell." "Yes, please do not hang up. I work at the Prescott Hotel. The one from the photos." My breath hitched. "Go on. I saw your name listed on the wedding guest roster. I have been trying to reach someone who might understand." The man paused, then spoke again, voice trembling. "Carl Brewer paid me to delete footage from the hallway cameras. For years. Every few months he would come back with another request. 'Delete this, delete that. Please, I do not want to be involved, but—' I kept a backup, in case something went wrong." Sandra and I exchanged stunned looks. The man continued, "I emailed the files to the photographer last night. I think she tried to hide them. I am sorry. I cannot talk more. Please do not call this number back." The line went dead. For several seconds the room was silent except for the faint hum of Sandra's computer. Then Sandra exhaled slowly. "This is your witness, and this changes everything." She immediately began drafting legal notes, chain of evidence, witness account, metadata authentication, timeline, backup proof. She was building a case in real time, brick by brick, knowing Carl's entire life was about to crumble. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, letting everything wash over me. Every insult, every dismissal, every lie he fed my mother, every time he manipulated Michael. Every time he made me feel like the problem, the unstable one, the bitter one. And now the truth was sitting in front of us, undeniable, irreversible, catastrophic for him. My humiliation earlier that morning still burned, but now it fused with determination. My family had abandoned me in that hallway. They had doubted me, shamed me, pushed me aside. But I would not let that be the end of the story. Sandra finally looked up. "Here is what we do. First, we gather everything, every document, every statement, every piece of evidence. Second, we make sure your mother is protected legally. Third, Carl will be confronted with all of this in a controlled environment where he cannot lie his way out. And fourth, we make sure your brother knows the truth. Not Carl's version, the real one." A slow realization settled into my bones. This was no longer about proving I was right. It was about protecting my mother's future. It was about saving my brother from a man who had used him as a shield. And it was about finally breaking Carl's control over all of us. I straightened my shoulders, feeling something inside me shift. For the first time that day, the fear was gone, replaced with purpose. Carl thought he had won. He thought humiliating me in front of the family was enough to silence me. He had no idea what was coming next. He had no idea the truth was already bigger than him. And he had no idea that I was done being afraid. The moment Sandra laid out the plan, something inside me snapped into place like a puzzle piece I had been searching for my entire life. For once, I was not reacting to Carl's manipulation. I was acting against it, intentionally, strategically, and with the full force of truth behind me. We started immediately. Sandra pulled out a legal pad and began listing everything we already had and everything we still needed. The list was long, but it was solid. Photos, metadata, financial transfers, the hotel employee's testimony, the deleted surveillance footage, and my first-hand account of his violence. But there were more cracks to expose, more patterns to uncover, more lies to drag into the light. Sandra turned to me with that calm, razor-sharp focus she was known for. "Emma, I want you to go home and gather anything your mother might have unintentionally documented. Emails, bank statements, donation receipts, meeting minutes, anything with Carl's signature or involvement. If he has been using the foundation to fund his second life, there will be traces. Abusers always think they erase everything. They never do." I nodded, already planning the order of drawers and boxes I needed to search. But then fear flickered in me. My mother might be home, and Carl might come back early from the wedding if he suspected I was doing something. Sandra noticed my hesitation. "Do not go alone. Let me call Officer Ramirez." She trusted Ramirez, an old friend who worked off duty sometimes for legal clients needing security during investigations. But I shook my head quietly. If Carl saw a cop with me, it would tip him off immediately. And if he rushes home to destroy evidence, we lose everything. "I need to go quietly." Sandra studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, but keep your phone on. And if you sense danger, you leave immediately." 10 minutes later, I was back on the road, heading to my mother's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. The wedding would end soon. Carl might return sooner than anyone expected if he felt I had disobeyed him. I had a narrow window of time, no more than 2 or 3 hours, to gather whatever he had not yet destroyed. The house was quiet when I arrived. My mother and Carl lived in a modest 2-story home on a cul-de-sac lined with old cottonwood trees. I parked 2 houses down, just in case Carl returned unexpectedly. My pulse hammered as I walked up the driveway. The spare key was still hidden inside the ceramic planter by the door. My mother never imagined she needed protection from someone inside her own home. I stepped inside quietly. The house smelled like lavender detergent and fresh coffee. A mug was still in the sink from breakfast. My mother must have rushed out early for wedding preparations. I moved quickly to the office, a room Carl always kept meticulously organized. Too organized. The desk drawers were mostly locked, but the filing cabinet was not. Inside were folders labeled Foundation Financials, Donor Reports, Expense Ledgers. My breath caught. I pulled out everything. At first glance, the numbers looked clean. Too clean. Every expense neatly typed, every donation neatly recorded. But the totals did not match what Sandra and I had seen on the screenshots from the USB. Something was off. Very off. I flipped through months of paperwork. Then I found it. A line item repeated frequently. Miscellaneous youth outreach supplies. Large sums. No vendor listed. No receipts attached, just amounts. Significant amounts. Thousands. "This could be it," I whispered. I took photos of every suspicious page, then moved to the next drawer. Inside was my mother's old laptop, outdated, slow, but she still used it for board emails. I powered it on, praying Carl had not installed any tracking or monitoring software. The computer hummed loudly, struggling to wake from sleep. When the desktop finally loaded, I opened her email client. The inbox was filled with foundation messages, donors asking questions, board members scheduling meetings. I searched for the keyword reimbursement. Dozens of emails popped up. Most were innocent. But some were strange. Transfer approved on Carl's request. Reimbursement processed urgently, no receipt needed. Carl discussed budget reallocations, and the worst one of all, an email my mother had never opened subject line flagged by automatic filters, vendor discrepancy flagged for review, a report attached. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a notification from the accounting software stating that repeated payments had been routed to a private individual, not a business. The system flagged it as suspicious. My breath stopped. My mother had not even seen the email. Carl must have intercepted every alert before she could read them. He had been controlling everything, and she never knew. I saved everything to a new folder and emailed the files to Sandra immediately. Then I moved to the living room drawers, searching for anything else. That was when I found the notebook, leather-bound tucked under a stack of magazines, as if hidden in haste. Inside were handwritten notes in my mother's handwriting spanning months. Small things. Quiet things. Things she was afraid to say out loud. Carl withdrew another donation without telling me. Why is he so defensive lately? Am I overthinking, or is he hiding something? He snapped at me today for asking about missing receipts. I feel like I am losing him, or maybe losing myself. Each line broke something inside me. She had been screaming quietly into a notebook because she had no one else to turn to, no one who would listen. I took photos of every page. When I closed the notebook, I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I forced myself to keep moving. I had one more place to check. Carl's private lockbox stored in the bedroom closet. I kneeled in front of it. The lock was cheap. I had experience with woodworking locks and simple mechanisms like this. I grabbed a thin flat screwdriver from the kitchen toolbox and popped it open. Inside were neatly stacked envelopes labeled with months and years. Receipts, bank deposit slips, checks from the foundation, and then a folder marked personal. I opened it with a shaking breath. Inside were printed photos. Photos of the same woman and child from the hotel. Photos of birthdays. Photos of Christmas mornings. Photos of Carl holding the little girl as she blew out candles on a cake shaped like a dollhouse. My hand trembled so hard I dropped one of the pictures. 7 years' worth of memories he had built with his secret family. 7 years of lies he had fed my mother. 7 years of money he had stolen to support them. I took every photo, every slip, every document that could be legally copied and photographed. Then I placed everything back exactly where I found it. I checked the hallway through the window one last time. The street was still quiet. No sign of Carl's truck. I exhaled a shaky breath and locked the door behind me as I left. My phone buzzed with a message from Sandra. Perfect. This is enough to initiate the next phase. We have him, Emma. We finally have him. And for the first time all day, the humiliation of the wedding hallway dissolved, replaced by something stronger than anger. Purpose. Determination. Justice. Carl had built his life on secrets. Now those secrets were finally in the hands of someone who would expose them, and there was no going back. I drove back to my workshop with the kind of adrenaline that made every sound feel sharper, every color brighter, every breath too shallow. By the time I parked behind the building, my hands were trembling from equal parts fear and righteous fire. I had everything now, not just the photos from Mara, not just the financial files Sandra analyzed. I had my mother's notes, the suspicious emails, the donation discrepancies, the hidden receipts in Carl's lockbox, the printed photos of the second family, and worst of all for him, the hotel employee willing to testify that Carl had been deleting surveillance footage for years. Carl had spent almost a decade weaving his lies into something thick enough to choke my mother, my brother, and even me. But now that whole web was unraveling strand by strand, and he did not even know it yet. The silence inside my workshop felt grounding, familiar. The smell of sawdust and varnish steadied my nerves. I placed all the evidence in a single large envelope and tucked it into the hidden drawer beneath my workbench, the one no one knew existed except me. Then my phone buzzed. Sandra, call me when you are done. We need to plan the confrontation carefully. I typed back, I will. Just need a minute to breathe. But I barely had 5 minutes. That was all the universe allowed before a familiar engine rumbled outside the workshop, a sound I had grown up dreading, a sound that made every hair on my arms stand up straight. Carl's truck. He had left the wedding early. He knew. Somehow he knew I had not gone home. Maybe my mother called him. Maybe Michael told him I had left in tears. Maybe his paranoia simply told him where to find me. Whatever it was, I had only seconds to prepare. I slid the envelope farther into the hidden compartment, shoved the drawer shut, and wiped my hands on my jeans. My heart hammered. The workshop door swung open. Carl stepped inside with the same false calm he always used before violence. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled as if the mask he wore all morning had finally cracked. He closed the door behind him. The click echoed through my ribs. "You left the wedding." His voice was quiet, too quiet. "You embarrassed your mother, you humiliated your brother, and you made a fool of yourself." I folded my arms tightly across my chest. "You hit me. Twice." His eyes hardened, but he forced a smile. "You fell. You always fall." His words hit me harder than his hand ever could because they were the same ones he had used my entire life to rewrite history. Not this time. I stood taller. "You do not get to control the narrative anymore. I know everything, and I have proof." His jaw twitched. He stepped closer. "Proof of what?" "That I tried to stop you from ruining your brother's wedding." My voice stayed steady. "Proof of your second family. Proof of the money you stole from Mom's nonprofit. Proof of the hotel visits. Proof of the deleted footage." His expression finally cracked. For a split second, the fear underneath appeared raw and exposed. Then it twisted into something darker. "You stupid girl." His voice dropped to a growl. "Do you have any idea what you are doing? You think you are some kind of hero. You think you are saving your mother. You are going to destroy her. Not me. Her." I inhaled sharply. He was still using her as a weapon, still betting on my love for her to keep me quiet. I stepped back just enough to keep distance between us. "I found the financial records, Carl, the ones you tried to hide." His breathing grew heavier. "You were in my house." He said it slowly, as if processing the level of betrayal he believed he had the right to feel. "After everything we did for you, after everything I gave you." Rage flickered through me. "You did nothing for me. You spent years punishing me for existing." He stared at me with something close to disgust. "You always needed to be the victim. You needed attention. You needed someone to blame for your failures, and I was convenient." I shook my head slowly. "You are projecting your entire life onto me, Carl. You wanted power, control. And when Mom trusted you with the foundation, you abused that trust. And when she loved you, you betrayed her." His face darkened. "You do not understand anything about adult relationships." I took a step forward, my voice cold. "But I understand crime. And what you did is a crime." His mask fell completely. There it was, the monster full and unfiltered. Carl lunged forward, grabbing the front of my shirt. I stumbled back, hitting the edge of my workbench. His hand pressed hard against my collarbone, pinning me in place. "You are going to tell me exactly where the evidence is. Right now. Or I will make sure the police believe you forged every bit of it." I gritted my teeth, ignoring the pain shooting down my shoulder. "That is not how the law works." He smirked. "The law is whatever people believe it is, and they will believe me long before they ever believe you. You have always been emotional, unstable, dramatic. Everyone saw you this morning. They already think you are the problem. You are nothing but a liability to your own family." Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the years of being belittled. Maybe it was the humiliation from the wedding. Maybe it was the knowledge that if I did nothing, my mother would suffer the consequences of his crimes. I shoved him hard with every ounce of strength I had. He stumbled back, hitting the side of a tall shelving unit. A few small boxes toppled down. He steadied himself, eyes blazing. "You are going to regret that." I grabbed the closest thing within reach, a wooden mallet I used for joinery. I did not raise it to attack. I simply held it in front of me like a warning. "You do not get to control me anymore. You do not get to scare me. You do not get to rewrite the truth." He stared at me long and hard, calculating, weighing his options, realizing for the first time that I was not the same girl he had bullied for nearly 20 years. "You think this is over," he said finally, his voice cold and steady. "It is not. I will fix this. I will fix all of it. And when this blows over, your family will see exactly who you are." He turned to leave, but I said one last thing that made him stiffen at the doorway. "The files are already with my lawyer, and if anything happens to me, everything goes public." Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. The look he gave me could have burned wood. Then he walked out. The door slammed behind him so hard the windows rattled. My breath came out shaky and uneven, but the fear that once paralyzed me was gone, replaced with something fiercer than anything I had ever felt. Resolve. Carl no longer had control, and the next time we met, he would not be able to hide behind lies, manipulation, or violence. The next time we met would be in front of witnesses with every truth laid bare. The second confrontation had ended, and the final reckoning was now inevitable. 3 days after the wedding, Sandra decided it was time. Time to stop gathering evidence. Time to stop letting Carl move freely. Time to force every lie he had ever told into the light, where even he could not twist it anymore. She scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday morning at her downtown office, a neutral ground where emotions would still explode, but structure would contain them. Her conference room was large, polished, and intimidating enough to make even seasoned executives sweat. Perfect for someone like Carl, who depended on controlling the environment around him. I barely slept the night before. My nerves were a rotating storm of dread and relief. Dread because I knew Carl would come armed with every manipulation he'd spent years perfecting. Relief because for the first time in my life, someone else would be in the room with me when the truth finally broke open, and they would not let him twist it. At 9 a.m. sharp, Sandra and I sat on one side of the long conference table. A thick binder sat in front of her. The envelope of evidence lay beside it. My stomach churned. The clock ticked loudly. At 9 a.m. on the dot, the door opened. My mother entered first. She looked 10 years older than she had a week earlier. Her shoulders curled in defensively, her fingers trembling as she clutched her purse. Then came Michael. His jaw was tight, his expression guarded, but there was exhaustion behind his eyes, as if he had replayed the wedding hallway scene over and over and still could not make sense of it. Then Carl walked in. Calm, cool, self-assured, wearing a pressed gray suit and the smug expression of a man convinced he could still control the narrative. He did not look at me, not even once. He nodded politely at Sandra like he was greeting a casual acquaintance at a charity luncheon. "Thank you for arranging this," he said smoothly as he took his seat. "I am sure we can clear up whatever confusion my stepdaughter has created." My mother flinched at the sharpness of the word stepdaughter. Sandra wasted no time. "Before we begin, I want everyone to hear this clearly. This is a legal consultation, and everything stated here is being recorded for protection of all parties." Carl stiffened slightly, but forced another smile. "Of course. I have nothing to hide." Sandra opened the binder. "Carl, I am going to present evidence piece by piece. You may respond, but you may not interrupt. If you raise your voice or become aggressive in any way, the meeting ends immediately. Do you understand?" He leaned back casually. "I understand." His confidence was nauseating. My mother looked at him for reassurance. Michael crossed his arms but said nothing. Sandra turned her attention to the first page of the binder. "Let's begin with the financial documents." She slid the first exhibit across the table, a printed spreadsheet with highlighted entries. Unauthorized withdrawals from the nonprofit, repeated, large, no attached receipts, described vaguely as supplies. She tapped the page. "These transactions were processed under your administrative login. Can you explain why the foundation's funds were routed to a private bank account belonging to a woman named Hannah Warren?" The name hit my mother like a slap. She looked at Carl, confusion etched across her face. Carl cleared his throat. "That must be a mistake, likely a clerical error. Or perhaps Emma misunderstood something she found." Sandra didn't blink. "I did not say Emma found this. The accounting software flagged it months ago. The report was emailed to Linda's inbox but deleted before she opened it. My mother's eyes widened. Carl's jaw twitched for the first time. Sandra turned the page. Here are screenshots of every flagged transfer over the last 3 years. Names, dates, account numbers, all traced to the same person, and then another incident, and another, and another. My brother leaned forward. His voice cracked slightly. Carl, what is this? Carl laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Come on, Michael. You know this kind of thing happens all the time. Nonprofits have complicated financial systems. Numbers get mixed up. Invoices get mislabeled. It's not unusual. Sandra cut in sharply. Then let's look at the invoices. She slid another document forward. These are the vendor receipts you submitted for reimbursement, and here are the images of the actual business addresses. All of them vacant, closed, or not associated with the names listed. Carl shifted uncomfortably. That does not prove anything. Businesses close all the time. Those addresses could have been correct when the payments were made. My mother's voice finally broke through the tension, quiet but trembling. Carl, why would you hide these from me? Why didn't you tell me any of this? He reached for her hand. Because someone is trying to manipulate you, Linda. Someone who never wanted us to be a family. His eyes darted toward me. Emma stole documents from our home. She trespassed. She is trying to punish me because she cannot let go of the past. My mother withdrew her hand, the smallest but sharpest gesture in the room. Sandra continued. All right, let's move on to the next category. The photographic evidence. Carl froze. Actual fear flickered in his eyes. Sandra clicked her remote, and the monitor on the wall lit up. Photo after photo flashed across the screen. Carl walking with the younger woman. Carl holding the little girl. Carl checking into the hotel. Carl carrying a gift bag with pink tissue paper. Each image held a timestamp. Embedded metadata. Location. Date. Time. My mother's breath hitched. Her hand flew to her mouth. Michael looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. Carl shot out of his seat. Those photos are fake. That is Photoshop. That is manipulation. That is not me. Sandra didn't even look up. These files are tethered to the camera IDs. They were verified by an independent metadata expert. They cannot be altered without detection. His face turned gray. He sank back into his chair. Sweat formed at his temple. Sandra pressed a button. Another image appeared. Carl kneeling in front of the little girl as she tied a friendship bracelet around his wrist. The timestamp was from 2 months ago. My mother broke. Tears spilled over her lashes as she whispered, That child? Who is that child? Carl rubbed his forehead. Linda, please, listen to me. This is not what it looks like. Michael's voice rose with quiet fury. Really? Because it looks exactly like what it is. It looks like you have a second family. Carl's composure snapped. He slammed his hand against the table. Enough. I am not going to sit here and let all of you be manipulated by her. He pointed at me with a shaking hand. She is doing this to hurt us. She is jealous. She has always been jealous. I finally spoke for the first time since the meeting began. Carl, stop lying. Look at them. Look at what you did to this family. He spun toward me, rage flashing across his face. If you think Sandra raised her voice sharply, sit down. Carl froze mid-sentence. Sandra continued, We are not done. The door opened and a man stepped inside. The hotel employee from Prescott. His voice trembled as he introduced himself. I have information about Mr. Brewer's visits. Carl's eyes widened in horror. No, no, you cannot bring him here. This is harassment. The man continued. Mr. Brewer paid me cash to delete camera footage. He visited often, always with the same woman and the same child. He said it was for privacy. But after a while, he swallowed hard. I realized it might be wrong. Carl stood up again, voice cracking. You cannot trust him. He is lying. Sandra's gaze was ice. And finally we come to the part you cannot gaslight your way out of. She slid her final document across the table. the audio recording from the preparation room. Carl's words filled the conference room. "If you ruin this wedding, I swear I will make you regret it. You think anyone will believe you. You have always been unstable. You have always been dramatic. I will destroy you before you destroy me." And then the sound of the hit. The room fell silent. My mother stared at the table, trembling uncontrollably. Michael looked sick. Carl's face collapsed in on itself, years of lies failing to hold him upright. My mother whispered through broken sobs, "How could you? How could you do this to us?" Carl finally dropped the last mask. His voice was small, pathetic, desperate. "Linda, I can explain," but there was nothing left to explain. The truth was on the table, and there was no place left for him to hide. Carl stumbled out of Sandra's office like a man who had been gutted, the weight of every lie and every betrayal pressing down on him at once. His confident stride was gone, replaced by uncertainty, fear, and disbelief. My mother clung to Michael's arm, her face pale, still trembling from the flood of revelations. Michael's hands were balled into fists, his jaw tight, every muscle in his body straining with anger and shock. Outside, the city hummed along, oblivious to the destruction that had just unfolded within the walls of a polished downtown office. But inside, Carl's empire of deception was collapsing piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The first consequence hit immediately. Sandra instructed Michael to call the bank and freeze Carl's personal accounts linked to the foundation and his private expenditures. Within minutes, notifications arrived. Transfers blocked, cards declined, balances frozen. He could no longer access the stolen funds. His face contorted in panic as he stared at his phone, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The woman in the red dress, the mother of his secret child, arrived at the office moments later. She was demanding payments, child support proof of security, and a written acknowledgement of obligations. Carl flinched with every word, realizing that the private life he had hidden so carefully for 7 years was now public in the eyes of those who mattered most. He had no defense, no shield to hide behind. Meanwhile, the nonprofit organization my mother had built was under immediate scrutiny. The board convened, reviewing the evidence I had brought forward. Sandra advised my mother to file reports with both the state charity regulator and law enforcement. It was not just a moral reckoning, it was legal. Carl's fraudulent transactions, embezzlement, and repeated attempts to manipulate records had now become criminal charges. The Foundation's board acted quickly. They suspended his access, demanded full audits, and began to outline formal complaints with the Attorney General's office. Carl could only watch in horror, his arrogance replaced by helplessness. Michael finally spoke, voice shaking but firm. "Dad, I cannot believe you. You risked everything. Our family. Mom. For what?" Carl's eyes darted from Michael to my mother to me. He attempted the familiar excuses, the smooth words he had perfected over decades. "It's not what you think. You misunderstand. I was protecting the family, but no one believed him. The photos, the metadata, the bank statements, the emails, the recordings, the hotel employee. They all pointed to the same undeniable truth. The man they had trusted, adored, and relied upon had lied for years, siphoning funds, hiding a second family, and abusing the trust of everyone who cared about him. My mother's voice, finally strong and resolute, cut through the room. "Carl, you are no longer part of this family. You betrayed everything I built, everything I believed in, everything you claimed to love." She had been broken, afraid, confused, and now she was angry, and that anger was precise, targeted, and unstoppable. Carl opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He realized that words could not undo the evidence, could not undo the pain, could not undo the betrayal. Law enforcement was the next inevitable consequence. Sandra had already contacted the police, and detectives were scheduled to interview him regarding multiple charges: financial fraud, embezzlement, and potential endangerment of a minor through concealment and exploitation of foundation funds. His panic escalated when he realized these were criminal matters, not just family disputes. He tried to bargain, to plead, to promise repayment, but the damage was irreparable. Meanwhile, the media aspect loomed. Word of the scandal had reached the Foundation's communications team, and an internal investigation was already creating a trail that, if leaked, could devastate his reputation further. Every board member, donor, and affiliate organization would know of his actions within days. My mother, though still processing, began making immediate changes to protect herself and the nonprofit. Passwords were changed, accounts were closed, and access for Carl revoked permanently. The last consequence hit socially. Michael, furious and betrayed, cut ties immediately. Family dinners, holidays, casual interactions, everything was off limits to Carl. The web of trust he had taken for granted was gone. No ally remained within our family. He had isolated himself completely, and he had no one to blame but himself. Carl's pride, arrogance, and manipulation had turned against him. His careful construction of lies, the performances he had relied upon for decades, crumbled in hours. And the one thing he underestimated, my determination and Sandra's expertise, ensured that every lie he told, every fraud he committed, and every act of violence against me would now be exposed and held accountable. By evening, he had been served notices regarding financial freezes, child support obligations, and criminal investigations. Police officers had already taken preliminary statements. He sat alone in his office, a man stripped of power, control, and family loyalty. The contrast to the life he had imagined for himself was unbearable. There would be no smooth reconciliation, no clever escape. No manipulation could salvage his position. The consequences were absolute and unavoidable. I finally felt a release, though the anger lingered. Carl had been the source of fear, chaos, and abuse for decades, but now he faced the precise mirror of his own actions. The day ended with Sandra's final instructions: maintain documentation, do not confront Carl further without legal presence, and prepare for formal charges. I left the office late, the sun already setting over Flagstaff, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I felt the weight of years lifted slightly, the sense of justice beginning to balance the scales. My mother and Michael were safe. The Foundation was protected. Carl's empire of deceit was crumbling, and I realized as I walked to my car with a quiet sense of purpose that the storm he had created for us was now contained, channeled, and redirected. The consequences had fallen upon him, and there was no way back. The past could not be rewritten, and the future was ours to shape without fear. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without anxiety, without the pressing weight of Carl's lies pressing down on me, because the reckoning was complete, the damage irreversible, and the truth fully revealed. Carl's world had collapsed, and our lives, though scarred, were beginning the slow process of healing. In the days following Carl's downfall, the house felt strangely quiet, almost surreal. My mother moved cautiously through the rooms, touching surfaces as if seeing them for the first time. Each corner held memories of years spent under the weight of Carl's manipulation, yet now they seemed lighter, no longer tainted by fear. Michael avoided eye contact at first, still wrestling with the cognitive dissonance of realizing his father had been a fraud. The wedding incident and the revelations had shattered the illusions he had clung to, and the anger simmered quietly beneath his calm exterior. He spent the first morning after everything in the workshop with me, silent at first, running his fingers over the wood, as if grounding himself in something real and tangible. Finally, he looked up and whispered, "I should have believed you sooner." I wanted to say it doesn't matter now, but instead, I just nodded, feeling the tension of the last week slowly uncoil. My mother joined us mid-morning, clutching a mug of coffee, still trembling but determined. She sat down, letting the warmth seep through her hands, and said softly, "Emma, I am so sorry for doubting you, for not seeing the truth sooner." I reached across and held her hand. "Mom, you weren't at fault. Carl was always good at hiding it." She shook her head, tears spilling freely now, the first honest release of grief and regret I had seen in years. I let her cry, letting the sound fill the workshop, fill the house, fill every space Carl had once dominated. Michael finally spoke again, calmer now. "And I should have protected you. I was blind. I believed him, not you." I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of relief and sadness. None of it was easy, but none of it mattered as much as this. We were finally seeing each other clearly. For the first time, our family could breathe without the suffocating presence of lies. Over the next week, conversations became longer, more honest. My mother started opening up about the subtle ways Carl had manipulated her for decades, about how she had questioned herself constantly, how she had ignored little inconsistencies to keep peace to preserve the image of a happy family. Michael admitted his own shame for defending Carl for prioritizing the wedding over truth, for letting me be the scapegoat. Each confession felt like a weight lifting a healing thread, sewing the rift open again. I shared with them what it had felt like being isolated and attacked at the wedding, the fear that had coursed through me, and the resolve I had found in protecting the evidence. My mother's eyes filled with understanding, her hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture of solidarity I had almost forgotten existed. Slowly, laughter returned to the house. Quiet at first, hesitant, a tentative reclaiming of the space Carl had poisoned for so long. Michael even smiled fully once, a rare moment while telling a story about the rehearsal dinner mishaps that made all three of us laugh despite ourselves. Our bond, fractured by Carl's deceit and abuse, began to repair itself through honesty, acknowledgement, and the simple act of witnessing each other's truth. My mother revisited the nonprofit, auditing every transaction herself, verifying every remaining document, asserting control over the organization Carl had tried to manipulate. She allowed Michael and me to help, and together we untangled the mess, creating new systems of oversight and accountability. There was pride in her eyes, a newfound strength, the kind that comes only after surviving deception and reclaiming power. Michael, for his part, began making amends in subtle but meaningful ways. He reached out to members of the family affected indirectly, apologizing for his initial disbelief, and offered to support initiatives at the foundation, proving his commitment to integrity. The household began to function differently. Carl's shadow had disappeared, replaced by a space of measured trust and mutual respect. The emotions were raw, still bruised in places, but no longer poisoned. I felt it deeply, the slow, cautious, yet undeniable transformation of my family. From fear, denial, and complicity into awareness, accountability, and healing. We could laugh without fear of Carl's manipulation, twisting it into criticism. We could plan family events without trepidation. Even mundane things like sharing meals, doing laundry, or working in the workshop together became acts of reclaiming normalcy. Mara, who had been my lifeline during the evidence gathering, became a constant presence, not just as a friend, but as a witness to our recovery. She joined in the meals, helped document the nonprofit reforms, and offered perspective whenever lingering doubts arose. In her presence, I felt a safety I had not known in years. Carl's absence was a strange liberation. No longer did his shadow loom over our actions, conversations, or decisions. We were forced to confront the gaps his lies had left, but doing so together made each challenge surmountable. Over the next few weeks, my mother, Michael, and I began to make plans for the future that did not include Carl. Vacations were discussed. Foundation projects were reimagined. The house itself, once a place of tension and fear, now felt like a home reclaimed, each room a testament to our resilience. Even the memories of Carl's abuse, though painful, became reminders of what we had endured and survived. Emotional wounds remained, but they were tempered by action and solidarity. Slowly, the emotional pendulum swung from fear and distrust to cautious optimism. We laughed sometimes softly, sometimes fully, and each time felt a sense of rightness of life beginning to breathe again. For the first time in years, family meant something untainted by deception, something real, solid, and healing. And I, Emma Caldwell, stood in the middle of it, no longer the victim, but a participant in reconstruction, in renewal, and in reclaiming the emotional integrity of the family I loved. The journey was far from over, but the foundations were laid. Carl had lost control, and the emotional transformation of my family had begun in earnest, rooted in truth, courage, and the undeniable bond that survived even the harshest of betrayals. Weeks passed, and the quiet aftermath of Carl's downfall settled over our lives like a tentative spring. The house felt different now, lighter, filled with a sense of ownership and safety that we had not known for decades. My mother, once cautious and fearful, began to reclaim her space, her voice confident in board meetings and conversations with family, and even in daily household decisions. She walked with her shoulders back, a subtle yet profound change that told me she no longer needed Carl's validation to feel whole. Michael, too, transformed. The shock of betrayal had initially left him withdrawn, but gradually he embraced responsibility. apologizing to everyone who had been affected, helping restore trust where Carl had eroded it, and stepping into a more mature, grounded role in our family. As for me, I returned to my workshop carving wood and shaping furniture not just for a living, but as a meditation, a ritual of reclaiming control over my own life. The familiar smell of sawdust and the rhythm of chiseling and sanding became my therapy, a space where I could feel strength and peace again. Mara remained a close friend present during our emotional recovery and offering support wherever needed. She was not only a witness to the truth, but a companion in rebuilding a family fractured by deception and abuse. Her presence reminded me that alliances built on integrity were the strongest ones. Legal consequences had begun to catch up with Carl. The Foundation launched a full investigation, and authorities initiated formal inquiries into his embezzlement and misuse of funds. He faced criminal charges, restitution demands, and social isolation as word of his betrayal spread. The wife of his secret family pursued legal claims securing her child's rights and support, further constraining his freedom. In parallel, our family rebuilt not only practical systems but emotional ones. Family dinners became opportunities for genuine connection discussions about the future and shared laughter rather than tension and manipulation. Michael even invited me to help plan the next family event, a symbolic gesture of trust and reconciliation. We discussed vacations, foundation projects, and personal goals. Every decision carried the weight of lessons learned, every conversation an affirmation that we would no longer allow deceit to dictate our lives. Slowly, I allowed myself to feel peace, something I had forgotten in years of stress, fear, and family discord. Nights were quieter and sleep came easier. The constant anxiety that had shadowed me since discovering Carl's duplicity lifted, replaced by the satisfaction of knowing justice was in motion and that our family, though scarred, was healing. The house itself, once a monument to Carl's control, had become a sanctuary. Each room, each object, each familiar corner was now associated not with fear or manipulation, but with memory, security, and reclaiming life on our terms. My mother's laughter, Michael's calm assertiveness, and Mara's supportive presence created a rhythm of life that was ours alone. The healing extended beyond the home. Relationships with extended family and friends improved as the truth was revealed. Trust rebuilt slowly but steadily, now anchored in transparency rather than deception. The foundation regained credibility under my mother's oversight, with Michael and me assisting ensuring proper governance and accountability. We turned the betrayal into a teaching moment for others, establishing clearer safeguards and policies to prevent misuse, and in doing so, transformed a story of deception into a testament of resilience and ethical vigilance. Emotionally, the transformation was profound. Where fear, humiliation, and tension had ruled, now acceptance, understanding, and empowerment flourished. I could think of Carl without anger consuming me, focusing instead on the evidence of his downfall as a lesson in the importance of vigilance, courage, and truth. Michael and my mother often reflected aloud on the experience, acknowledging the mistakes that had allowed Carl's manipulation to persist and expressing gratitude for the evidence that had revealed it. Their vulnerability and honesty strengthened our bonds further. In the workshop, I crafted my most intricate pieces, infusing them with the symbolism of renewal and endurance. Mara captured some of these pieces, photographing them for both professional and personal archives. These creations became a metaphor for our family pieces once marred by external forces, reshaped, strengthened, and made beautiful through patience, effort, and care. Socially, Carl's isolation deepened as news of his crimes and deceit spread, and the relief within our family was palpable. We no longer navigated our lives under the shadow of a manipulator. Each day, each decision, each interaction carried the freedom of autonomy and the affirmation of truth. The healing was gradual but unmistakable. Emotional scars remained reminders of what we endured, but they no longer dictated our lives. We faced each day with clarity, communication, and a shared understanding that deception would not be allowed to fester again. On one particularly quiet morning, I sat on the terrace with a cup of coffee, sunlight warming my face. Birds sang softly in the distance, and the house hummed with a calm energy. Michael had left early for a meeting. My mother was organizing the Foundation's archives, and Mara had stopped by to discuss a photography project for the nonprofit. I breathed deeply, savoring the stillness. No fear, no lies, no manipulation. Just truth restored family bonds and the promise of a future built on integrity. It was a profound moment of clarity. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I felt fully safe, fully seen, and fully empowered. Carl had fallen, justice was underway, and the family he had tried to control had reclaimed not just the home, the foundation, or the money, but the essence of what it meant to live free from deception and fear. I smiled faintly to myself, knowing that while scars remain, they were the marks of survival resilience and the triumph of truth over lies. The healing had begun, and with it the future. Our future was ours to shape. Have you ever felt the weight of betrayal so heavy it threatens to crush your very sense of self? Have you ever watched someone you trusted manipulate, lie, and steal from the people you love most, while the world around you seemed oblivious? Imagine standing in Emma's shoes, holding evidence that could change everything, knowing that one wrong move could destroy relationships or, worse, put you in harm's way. Could you find the courage to act, or would fear paralyze you? Would you remain silent to keep the peace, or would you risk everything to protect the truth? This story is not just about one family. It is about the quiet battles so many of us face behind closed doors, the subtle manipulations, the lies that fester in silence, the emotional toll of standing up to someone who believes they have power over you. How would you respond if your own home was invaded not by strangers, but by someone who should love and protect you? How would you protect those who cannot protect themselves? And when the truth finally surfaces, would you have the strength to face the fallout, to watch as consequences unfold and justice finally prevails? Imagine feeling the fear and adrenaline, the uncertainty, the moral tension that Emma faced, knowing that exposing Carl could rip apart family bonds, yet leave them intact for future healing. Can you relate to a moment in your life when speaking up was terrifying, yet necessary? Have you ever witnessed manipulation and wondered if you should intervene or stay silent? Because here is the truth. Many of us never face directly. Life does not always allow us the luxury of watching from a distance. Sometimes action is required. Sometimes courage is demanded, and the outcomes are uncertain. Yet the choice to act defines not just the moment, but who we are. The emotional roller coaster of seeing a loved one exploit trust, lie, and endanger others, and then watching accountability take its course is something most people rarely experience firsthand. Yet this story gives you a glimpse into that intensity. The fear, the rage, the heartbreak, the relief, and ultimately the empowerment all flow together in waves, leaving you breathless, reflective, and maybe even inspired. What would you do if you were Emma? What choices would you make? How would you balance love, loyalty, and justice? Would you have the strength to hold the line to protect the vulnerable, to ensure that deceit does not continue? Are there moments in your life where you have had to confront harsh truths about someone close and decide how to act? The questions are uncomfortable but necessary, and the answers often define us. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? What time is it when you are seeing Emma's journey unfold? Did you feel the tension, the fear, the weight of responsibility? Did you feel the moment when courage became action? Drop your location and your local time in the comments and tell me what you would have done in Emma's situation. How would you protect your family? How would you act when the stakes are so high? Your voice matters here because this story is not just entertainment. It is a mirror of real struggles, real emotions, and real decisions. Sharing your thoughts might help someone else recognize the importance of truth and courage in their own life. Remember to like this video if Emma's bravery inspired you to confront your own fears. Share this story with someone you trust because these lessons about justice, accountability, and personal empowerment are too important to keep to yourself. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that challenges your perspective, tests your emotions, and celebrates the power of courage and truth. Your comment, your interaction, your engagement is part of the story too, because in reflecting on Emma's journey, you are also reflecting on your own capacity to act, to protect, and to stand for what is right. Take a moment, now breathe and type your response. Think about what you would do if faced with the same betrayal, if you discovered the hidden truth, if you had to act alone, yet carry the weight of accountability and love for your family. It is time to join the conversation and share your courage.